Hey guys, Native American Tatanka. You're listening to We Are Wrestling Old School versus New School. It's again Native American Tatanka. Peace. I'm out.
Stick to what you know how to do best. That's talking to that and sign checks. Leave the rest on to me, Daddy.
Up goes Blanchard.
My hard-earned tax money.
1, 2, 3, guaranteed victory.
It's always you, Brett.
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
If you smell what the Rock is cooking.
I can tell you it's going to be a day that I'm never going to forget. A lot of things I want to get off my chest.
What is up? We are Wrestling Maniacs out there worldwide. I'm the host with the most, the best one, Donnie, here with...
The Armenian Nightmare, the beast from the Middle East, Chaz. What is up? We're Wrestling Maniacs. Woo!
This is a brand new episode of Old School versus New School. But before we get into this week's topic, if you're not a We Are Wrestling Maniac yet already, and you're not a part of the thousands of subscribers, the best way to support us is by hitting that subscribe button now, turning on the post notifications. Videos be coming out of nowhere like an RKO, and of course you already know the grind is real. And this week on Old School versus New School, what are we going to be talking about, Chaz?
All right, best one, Donnie. This week we're going to be talking about the greatest wrestling technicians of all time.
And this is an episode, I'm not going to lie to you, I've been looking forward to for quite a while, because in professional wrestling, there are different styles in wrestling that, you know, we watch in the ring. We get strong style, we get hardcore, we get high flying, and we also get technical wrestling. And for me, I've always loved and appreciated technical wrestling. And it's funny because when I was in second grade, I actually did do amateur wrestling. And I used to go in the circle against, you know, it was from like this program was like from first grade to about sixth grade.
Yeah.
And they would put us in a circle,
All right.
and we would have to pretty much get the person out of the circle.
Yep.
And as a second grader, big boy, by the way, I was taking out friggin' people all the way until fifth grade.
That's more like sumo wrestling, though. That's like...
Nah, man, amateur wrestling for the drills, they would try to get
Yeah,
you
no, I know.
go against somebody and get them out of the circle. Because I believe you get points in it or something. But then I decided to stop doing that to pursue basketball after my 1 year of doing technical wrestling. I did not like a singlet whatsoever. Felt very weird wearing one. I think I'd rather wear a Speedo than wear a singlet.
Couldn't have been any worse than Michael Cole.
Dude, Michael Cole is Triple H, man. Back in like 2012. Yeah, so obviously throughout the years, we've had different styles, and I'm very excited to really get into this because, you know, there's a whole different style behind technical wrestling, and there's so many great technicians throughout the years, and every year, you know, we get to see so much more, you know, professional wrestlers out there evolve and become, you know, very great technical wrestlers.
Yes.
So before, you know, we get into some of the wrestlers, I really want to understand the history behind technical wrestling, because I feel like when it comes to professional wrestling, when this became a thing, that was the first style.
Yeah.
Was technical wrestling.
Yeah.
And since, you know, you were born in 1937, I would love to know, you know, some of the history behind technical wrestling. Since you like to watch people wrestle in friggin' chicken coops.
Well, yeah, chicken coops for like 4 hours. You know, and well, you know, like you said it though, it all goes back really to amateur wrestling. It was ring work, consists primarily of moves and holds that you might expect to see in amateur wrestling, rather than, like the power-based matches or the high spots and stuff that we're used to seeing nowadays.
And that's the thing. Like, I feel like technical wrestling is like a forgotten gem
Yeah.
in pro wrestling.
And several technical wrestlers the biggest thing is they tried to finish their matches with submission moves. That's one of the, that was one of the things too.
And that's the thing for me, like, always as a professional wrestling fan, I've always loved when, like, Samoa Joe would put somebody in, like, the rear naked choke, or Kurt
Yeah.
Angle would put someone in the ankle lock. Chris Jericho, the Walls of Jericho.
Yep,
Ric
the
Flair,
sharpshooter.
the
Yep.
figure four leg lock.
Yep.
That's the thing that, like, in wrestling, like, technical wrestling is huge. And I really think about a lot of these independent wrestlers that are training, and I don't understand why a lot of them pick the high spots and the high flying and the strong style, when technical wrestling is just a forgotten gem that
Yes.
we've seen so much talent, have technical wrestling abilities, and they have had Hall of Fame careers because of it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
now everybody is just trying to, jump off trampolines like the friggin' ring ropes and stuff.
Yeah, they're trying to
I don't
outdo each
understand it.
other. Yeah, they're trying to outdo each other with, who can fly the highest and who can do the stupidest thing and who can try to kill themselves. I mean, these poor guys are going to be crippled by the time they're, 30 years old, some of these kids.
And that's the thing, man. Like, for example, here's a perfect example for new school wrestling. A couple people that stand out. They're in AEW, FTR and MJF. There's your perfect example. There's a reason why MJF is one of the greatest professional wrestlers right now in today's sport, because that man is not doing high flying moves. He pretty much can adapt to any style wrestling match. He has a great character. He's great on the mic. And the thing is, when it comes to these high spots, MJF does it when it matters.
Yes.
And he's more technical based when he's in the ring.
And he sprinkles it here and there, and exactly, he does it when it matters, and it makes more sense, and it adds something to the match. It's not like 80 different high spots and you're sitting there like, it's not every freaking 7 seconds. It's like, holy shit.
But that's the thing, man. With MJF and FTR, they're perfect examples of wrestlers that don't need to be springboarding off the top rope.
No.
They rely on their ability in the ring, and they take a lot of things that they've watched in old school wrestling and they bring it to new school wrestling. And because a lot of people are trying to be, sheeps and pretty much follow each other and just try to do friggin', oh, let me do a 720. Oh, I could beat you there. I could do a friggin' 1080.
Yeah.
It's all like they all try to compete about, who can jump the highest. When
they're all
in
cookie
reality,
cutters.
that's why MJF and FTR, they stand out, these guys, because they're not doing what other people are doing in today's wrestling.
Same with Bryan Danielson. Yep.
And it's like back in the day with high flying, like Rey Mysterio is one that really stood out because a lot of people at the time weren't doing what Rey Mysterio was doing.
Yeah. Just what you just said. Back in like the mid 80s, Leaping Lanny Poffo, actually, who we just lost a few weeks ago, he was doing moonsaults, okay, when nobody was doing stuff like that. In 1985, he was doing, flying head scissor. I mean, Macho Man was doing the double axe handle off the top rope from to the outside. Stuff that it was like you've never seen stuff like that.
And that's the thing, man, in today's wrestling that I could say as, new school, they really overdo it when it comes to maneuvers. And I feel like and I've always said this, old school, it's always been, I feel like, a slow paced. But then you get into the Attitude Era, it picks up a little bit.
Yeah.
Ruthless aggression, perfect pace. Today's wrestling, too fast.
Yeah.
There's not a balance, and that's something that is probably why I'm excited to get into this with technical wrestling, because we're really going to be pretty much taking this time and appreciating the ones that really craft their work in the ring, and they don't have to rely on suicide dives and, friggin' jumping off the top rope, doing tornado DDTs and friggin' doing backflips and front flips and, shooting star presses. We're
Yeah.
going to be talking about the guys that are in the mat.
Yep.
And that's what
On
I'm
the
excited about getting
absolutely.
into this. Who are some of, the best technical wrestlers back in the day, old school? Because of
Um,
course, there was a lot of those.
for me, right off the bat, right that comes to mind, obviously Bret Hart, I'd say Greg the Hammer Valentine. I know you say things were too slow paced, but what I loved about Greg the Hammer Valentine is he would take a guy, his move was the figure four leg lock, and he would take a guy and he would soften up the guy's legs. He would tell a story, and he would, the whole match, throughout the match, he would try to soften up that leg for that figure four leg lock, and then apply it, and then you know what I mean. Him and Tito Santana had some of the best, matches, classics of all time.
And that's like one of the best things about old school wrestling. I love about technicians. They work on a body part and it really the thing about technical wrestling is it makes so much logical sense, which
Yep.
is something that I really love and appreciate, especially, going back and, watching some of these old matches throughout the years, because we don't really get that often with new school wrestling.
And when we do, it's really special,
Somebody that really stands out to me, old school wrestling as a technician, that I really enjoyed watching a lot, especially WCW, Dean Malenko, the man with 1,000
1,000
holds.
holds. Oh man, I love Dean Malenko. Absolutely.
Like his whole character was based upon his technical wrestling abilities in the ring. The man with 1,000 holds.
He was so old school, just wearing that all black on black. He was just so good.
And the thing I
So
love
good.
too with Dean Malenko, one of my favorite feuds in WCW that I love looking back at was Dean Malenko versus Chris Jericho for the
Oh, yeah.
Cruiserweight Championship. They really, brought the best out of each other in this feud. And Chris Jericho had one of his most famous promos, 1,004 moves written on a big piece of paper.
Yeah.
Naming all of these moves that go into commercial, and then the commercial comes back on. He's still naming moves. And that's the thing, Dean Malenko was so talented when it came to technical wrestling and had so much classics, even outside of WWE. And then when, he signed with WWE, he was a big, part in the light heavyweight division.
Yeah. Yep.
And did, fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the Radicals, man.
Yeah.
All of them guys in the Radicals, they were great technicians.
They were. Absolutely. Good call. Another one that stands out to me, as far as you saying working on body parts, was rugged Ronnie Garvin. He would have the Garvin stomp, and he would go around, he would take his foot and stomp literally on every part of the body. He would stomp on your leg, each leg, and then each arm, and then stomp on the head, and then the mid body, and then he would go for the pin. And he was just one of the most amazing technical wrestlers ever. He had a big feud with Greg the Hammer Valentine, right around the early 89, 90, around then. Then he became a referee, and it's kind of strange, but
I'll tell you right now, man, for me, one of my favorite technicians of all time, he was in the Attitude Era, Ken Shamrock.
oh,
I loved Ken Shamrock in the Attitude Era. One of my favorite wrestlers as a kid growing up. I loved the intensity Ken Shamrock brought into his matches. And I loved the logical sense it made, because of course, you all know Ken Shamrock, UFC Hall of Famer, one of the best, mixed martial artists, out there, had, plenty of fights that were successful and made a career out of that. But around, 96, he wanted to, pretty much put the boots on and become a superstar. And
absolutely.
during the Attitude Era, it was the perfect time to have a character like Ken Shamrock. in there, and like he was doing, the suplexes. And before Kurt Angle did the angle lock, Ken Shamrock was the one that, made the angle lock famous.
Yep.
And I remember, his feud with The Rock during, 1998 for the Intercontinental Championship. Ken Shamrock made, The Rock tap out, but because he wouldn't let go of the ankle lock and because of his temper, which I loved that they
And he would
had
go
that for his
nuts.
character,
Yeah.
they
He'd
would
be
just
like,
qualify him, and then The Rock would retain the championship.
Yes.
And we
Yeah.
even got, the Lions Den match with Ken Shamrock versus Owen Hart versus Steve Blackman.
Oh, that was one of my favorite matches in the Attitude Era. It was so good. So good.
And that's the thing, man, with Ken Shamrock, bro. Like, around that time, like, we never really saw mixed martial art wrestlers get involved in, this sport.
Yes.
And Ken Shamrock kind of opened a door for some of these UFC guys and mixed martial artists to, make a change and try something different.
Vince was smart back then because obviously he was trying to compete with WCW at that time, and he was smart by bringing in guys, from the mixed martial arts world to, and it worked out. I mean, him
And
and
boxing,
Blackman,
man, Mike Tyson.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Good call. Yep.
And that all worked out, amazingly.
Absolutely. That leads to one of my absolute favorite, like, speaking of, Owen Hart, man. I mean, I do it right in my intro. That woo! That's a nod to the Blue Blazer. People might think it's Ric Flair, but Owen used to say, or Blue Blazer used to say it, because it was a nod or a rib on Hulk Hogan, the vitamins and the training. But he'd say, I'd say my prayers, take my vitamins, and drink my milk. Woo!
I do remember that.
Yep. But man, Owen was he's one of those guys. When he came in as the Blue Blazer in 1986, I believe.
And this was before before WWF, right?
No. In WWF. And no, so early 88 he came in. And he was doing stuff. He was doing flip. I mean, the guy was doing moves literally that nobody was. He could still, if he was the same age as when he had passed away at 34, he could still compete nowadays, and he could still keep up with the kids nowadays. I mean, there's no doubt.
That's the thing, man. I've always said this about Owen Hart: the wrong generation.
Yeah, so sad that we didn't get to see his full potential and what he could have achieved, and it was all for a stupid, goofy laugh. And I mean, you already know my feeling about that. And man, he was just phenomenal. His match with Brett at WrestleMania 10. I mean, and then the SummerSlam steel cage. That was the only steel cage match that Dave Meltzer gave 4 stars to.
Damn. But that's the thing, man, with like Owen Hart. For me, I really enjoyed his work, obviously, with Bret Hart in 1994. That was great. I also really enjoyed his feud with Triple H. I thought that they had a couple great matches in 1998 that a lot of people don't really look at.
No.
Also, I love the feud with Ken Shamrock and Owen Hart as well.
Oh,
they had the
really
match
good.
in Stu's basement.
Yep.
Where,
the dungeon match.
The dungeon. That was great. Also, that led into, the Lion's Den, which, was really awesome. That I enjoyed that feud a lot with, Owen Hart and Ken Shamrock. And then they added, the Beast, Dan
Severn,
involved in there too, which was nice. And I never understood why Owen Hart around that time went from being the Black Heart back to the Blue Blazer. It made absolute no sense to me because of how gifted and how talented he is in the ring, which is why I think I say he was, it was the wrong time.
Vince Russo. There you go.
Oh, God, I'm blocked by Vince Russo, by the way.
Oh,
and I'm so proud of myself.
Oh, I'm proud. I'm actually happy for you.
One of my biggest accomplishments as a, mark.
Absolutely.
bro.
Bro. No, Blackheart, which we are Blackheart debuted in Springfield, Massachusetts, where we are from. I am so proud to say that. I was there.
Degeneration X in your house.
Yep, I was there, baby. I was there for my 22nd birthday party.
And I feel like all you old school people were there because even Phil last week on the We Are Wrestling Old School versus New School is telling me he was there,
It was awesome.
making me jealous.
Mhm. Actually, fun fact, one of the guys I know that drives the transportation cars that, when I go to my appointments and stuff, he actually was the guy that threw the toilet paper at Shawn Michaels at the end of the match.
Such a small world.
Yes. That was really cool. He told me that. I was like, what? That's awesome.
All right, so somebody I definitely want to talk about. He's an ECW legend, Taz.
Oh,
Another great technician. Pretty much had one of the nicest, cleanest suplexes out there. And in ECW, a lot of these, legends relied on hardcore wrestling. Sabu relied on chairs. The Dudleys relied on tables.
yeah.
And, they all relied on weapons. But Taz, on the other hand, his
It was
weapons
gimmicky.
was, his submissions and his suplexes, becoming, the suplex machine. And that's the thing with Taz I really, enjoyed was pretty much like the real in his character.
Yeah, I loved how he came out with the towel over his head and he just was just I mean, he was just a monster.
And he
I
had like
loved
a
when he
little like
debuted.
mohawk at the top of his head too.
Yeah. He was just so good.
It's just unfortunate, like his career ended pretty short because he got an injury, I believe, in the neck.
Yeah.
Really.
But I mean, he's doing all right for himself. He's got
Great commentator.
Yeah, he actually really is. He's killing it.
And it's so cool too to like see his son Hook, try to follow his dad's footsteps.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you, technical wrestling, man, Hook, he's gonna be a good technician.
Yeah, Hook.
The more he gets in that ring and works.
You can tell he's got some of the old man in him, definitely. One of my favorites of all time, very old school, very, very old school wrestler, William Regal.
Who one of the greatest underrated technicians out there, man.
So freaking good. And he would just he was so cocky. He would, with his hand behind his back, and he was just had that pissy look on his face, and he also had that British strong style too, that because British wrestling is a little bit different too. So he would mix it up, and man, he was awesome. He was just so good. And his character, what an amazing heel.
Yeah, man, that's the thing about William Regal was he really put British wrestling on the map.
Yes.
Because of his, strong style, but he also was a great technician with submissions and, doing the fundamentals in the ring. And for me, I really enjoyed William Regal's work towards, the Attitude Era when they made him the commissioner. And then, in the Ruthless Aggression era, that's when, he was wrestling. He was, the Intercontinental Champion, European Champion. And that's the thing, man. William Regal was such a great heel. Like, I remember being a kid, I absolutely hated William Regal. When I heard the dun, 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 I wanted to slap him across the face. But that's something I would never do because William Regal, man, he'll freaking uppercut my head off my freaking body.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing, man. Like, William Regal absolutely killed it in his career.
Oh.
He was, he was able to be the serious character.
Oh, yeah.
He was able to be funny. He was able to do it all.
Yep. He was Lord Steven Regal, too.
That was back in WCW, right?
Yeah, or NWA, WCW. Yep.
Yeah. So now I really want to learn. There's one wrestler that I do want to learn, and I try to do this once a week here on, Old School versus New School. Because, of course, you have the old knowledge since, you're a little old and you got gray on you. So I think you're like the perfect person to talk to about this. Somebody I really want to learn a little bit about, and he's a great technician. So I think that this is a perfect episode to bring him up. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Oh,
Because
Oh.
one thing, like from looking back at the vault, that I really enjoyed about him was the arm drags. that
yes.
had.
He had the deepest, most beautiful, freaking cleanest arm drags. It's funny you said that because every time when I think of Steamboat, that's the one move I think of. That and the high cross body that he used to do. Those arm drags were gorgeous though. And of course, you already know my number one favorite wrestler, Macho Man. The match at WrestleMania 3, they're one of the best, my favorite match ever, and a lot of people's favorite match ever, and considered to be in the top 3. And some consider it the best match of all time, best WrestleMania match of all time. But yeah, he was really good. He had a great feud with Jake the Snake. You should check that out when Jake the Snake first came in.
That's the thing I was going to ask you. Like, if, you recommend matches for some new school fans to watch with Ricky the
Yes.
Dragon Steamboat,
Yes.
what matches would you recommend if,
Yes.
the new school fans are into, technical wrestling?
Okay, I actually not just WWE or WWF. You want to watch some classics? Check out Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair in NWA for the world title. Any of those matches were absolute classics, 4 stars, 5 stars all the way. Not even just an opinion. It's a fact. Absolutely.
That's another great technician too, Ric Flair, man.
Yes.
Figure 4 leg lock, one of the best
yeah.
submissions in professional wrestling.
Absolutely. But also I would recommend Ricky Steamboat, Macho Man, WrestleMania 3. Check it out. Definitely.
So, of course, in technical wrestling, one of, the biggest things, we kind of got into it a little bit during this episode, submissions.
Yes.
Of course, a lot of these, technical wrestlers, they love to work on a body part and then, they love to maneuver a submission hold. The opponent, they tap out to the submission and it's a part of the character. It's a part of the gimmick of, a certain wrestler.
Yeah.
And of course, throughout the years, we've had so many great submission matches. What's a submission match that really stands out to you?
I gotta say the Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Ooh, WrestleMania 13,
Yes,
right?
WrestleMania 13. Absolutely. That was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, that was more of an I quit thing, but it's still a submission thing. I mean, still a submission match. I mean, for the most part.
Man, I gotta say, like, for me, one of, my favorite submission matches has got to be in the Ruthless Aggression era. It was, I believe, either Unforgiven or Survivor Series 2005. It was John Cena versus Kurt Angle. And the reason why this really stood out to me was because at the time, Eric Bischoff, the GM of Raw, was trying to do whatever he could to get the title off of John Cena. He didn't want him to be the face of Monday Night Raw. So Eric Bischoff thought, let's put John Cena in the ring against one of the greatest technicians, Kurt Angle, in a submission match. I think this was Survivor Series, actually. And what happened was, during the match, they built it up like Cena, because he always finished, off with the attitude adjustment. Or
Right.
what you would say, Chaz,
The apple juice adjustment.
Yeah. And for the first time ever, John Cena introduced the STFU. And, it was a submission hold that he, would put on his opponent. And that was the first time he introduced it. And the thing I liked about that was it was different for John Cena to do a submission. And to introduce it, it was during a time where it mattered.
Yes.
Because, of course, in a submission match, you can't give somebody the apple juice adjustment. You have to put someone in a submission.
Sure.
And what better way to, debut a submission than in a submission match?
Yeah. And it showed he could. And that was awesome. Yeah, absolutely. That was a good call. one of my favorite, when I was a kid, one of my favorite wrestlers, period, and one of the best legit technical, not just technical wrestlers, one of the most legit amateur wrestlers. He was actually an Olympian. He was a U.S. Olympian, which is right because he's from Iran. The Iron Sheik had this finisher, the camel clutch, which was so freaking brutal. I remember me and my friends used to put that move on each other. And there was this thing on Instagram. They had the figure four leg lock, the camel clutch, the sharpshooter, and some other the crossface chicken, the crossface. And they said if you've never put one of these moves on your friends when you were a kid, then you're not a real wrestling fan.
Oh, I like put on like almost all of those submissions on my friends.
Absolutely.
Backyard wrestling.
That absolutely. That one was brutal though, because when you're sitting on someone's back and they got your arms behind and you can't breathe, it's like so crazy. It's so awesome.
Man, with New School Wrestling, somebody that did the camel clutch was Rusev.
Yes.
And I loved when he did it because like he would do a big stomp right to the spine of the wrestler.
Yep.
And then he just would clinch back until they're like,
yes. Yep. And you can't breathe. I mean, you really can't. It's like it's because it expands your lung and you're like, it hurts.
Yeah, remember that time when he put the camel clutch on Hulk Hogan, Bubba?
Oh, yes, Bubba.
And he got trash thrown all over him. That was when he defeated him for the WWF Championship, right?
Yes.
Oh, legitimate heat. You love it. Somebody that like old school, new school that I definitely, want to talk about. He's a great technician. Rest in peace. Man, Latino Heat, Eddie Guerrero.
Oh,
one of the cleanest technicians in the ring, man. Like,
no doubt.
The three amigos, like the 3 suplexes that he did, so freaking clean.
No doubt.
Also, he was able to do some high flying stuff as well as doing, technical wrestling, which I really liked about Eddie because he worked any style.
Yep.
But obviously, Eddie Guerrero, the style that he's known for is being a technician because of how, clean he is in between the mat.
Yeah, but that's because of his luchador background,
Luchadors.
Yeah, and he could mix that. He could mix it up in one match. I mean, he could go through every style and just destroy. I mean, yeah, Latino Heat, man. Rest in peace for sure. Man, him and Benoit, some classic matches. Classic matches.
And, before, we get into, more technician wrestling, we'll be right back with more old school versus new school. Saturday, June 17th, 2023, both Captain's Corner and Zombie Hideout are bringing professional wrestling back to the New England area with the Wrestling Classic 3, which will be a wrestling convention bringing in some of the best wrestlers throughout the years at this event in Springfield, Mass. at the South End Community Center. You can meet Hall of Famers Kurt Angle, Lex Luger, DDP, AEW stars, The Guns, and so many more classic stars to be announced on Saturday, June 17th. And for the first time ever, We Are Wrestling. We're going to be a vendor. We're going to be working with Zombie Hideout and Captain's Corner with this event. Best One Donnie has had the opportunity to go to both the Wrestling Classic 1 and 2. And let me tell you, the Wrestling Classic 3 is going to be like no other. And if you want to, have an opportunity to meet some of the best in the business, they will be in Springfield, Mass. on Saturday, June 17th. South End Community Center in Springfield, Mass. Also, the We Are Wrestling team will be there with a table. We'll be having merchandise, and we'll also be giving away some stuff as well. And of course, you already know, we'll be vlogging as well. You're definitely not going to want to miss this event. Get your tickets now.
What is up? We are Wrestling Maniacs. This is the Armenian Nightmare, the beast from the Middle East, Chaz, and you are watching We Are Wrestling's Old School versus New School.
We're back. And to the We Are Wrestling Maniacs out there, if you're watching WrestleMania 39, We Are Wrestling, we're going to be doing a 2-night stream, Saturday and Sunday night. You can watch us. We're going to have a huge house full of people, wrestling maniacs watching this. There's going to be me. There's going to be Old School Chaz. We're going to have from the We Are Wrestling podcast, Ben and Danny, and many more people on WrestleMania night 1 and 2. We're going to be doing a live watch along. You're not going to want to miss.
You
But
thought the
getting
Royal
back
Rumble was
into-
something.
Getting back into the technical wrestling, somebody that we do need to talk about and we do need to mention, he was, one of the best, technical wrestlers in the ring. And we're not talking about the human being. We're talking about the wrestler.
I know where you're going. Yep, absolutely. And I agree. 120%. Absolutely.
And this is somebody that, I was contemplating if, we would talk about him.
I know, because I had mentioned it before, and you were kind of like,
because, there are legends out there like, Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho who, still acknowledge Chris Benoit, the wrestler, because they, Chris Benoit had a lot of iconic matches with, Angle and Jericho that really defined and, made their careers what it is today.
That's like not acknowledging OJ Simpson's running back career, with the Buffalo Bills for what he did. It was for murdering his wife. I mean, it still doesn't erase what he did on that field. You know what I mean?
And it's just a sad,
He's a shitty
unfortunate
human
situation.
being. Yeah, it is.
What happened to Nancy and, Daniel.
Yep, absolutely.
But, with Chris Benoit, one of the matches, that really stood out to me, that I really, appreciated his work, has got to be, all the way back, to the Royal Rumble 2003, Chris Benoit versus Kurt Angle.
Oh, yes.
One of, the best, technical matches, I've ever watched.
When you have talent like that, and you cannot help but have, I mean, it's just no accident. I mean, it's just, you're going to have an incredible match. Those guys they're just both such perfectionists. I mean,
honestly, man, WCW, Chris Benoit versus Bret Hart. Those were some great matches, like towards the end of Bret Hart's career.
Actually, the night after Owen died, Chris Benoit and Bret actually had a match.
That was the main event of WCW that night.
Yep.
I do remember.
Yep.
Such a classic.
Yeah. Incredible.
And that's the thing, man. Like, even like WrestleMania 20, seeing Eddie Guerrero with the WWE Championship and seeing Chris Benoit with the World Heavyweight Championship.
What an incredible
Benoit
moment.
wins, the main event, and he's in the ring, hugging his son and, hugging Eddie Guerrero with all the confetti coming down. Such a beautiful moment. Because that's the thing about Eddie and Chris. They, both, came into pro wrestling around the same time, and their careers, were always, the same.
Yep.
When, Eddie Guerrero and Chris were doing stuff in New Japan, they were doing it together.
Yep.
You had ECW, you had WCW, you even had, WWE. They were part of, the Radicals.
Yeah.
And,
they were
they
best
both,
of friends.
they both ended up winning, the world titles and, having one of those, iconic moments.
That was an incredible moment. I remember that.
Because around the time, it was always about the big guys. It was always about the Hulk Hogan's, Macho Man's, Ultimate
Macho Man wasn't
Warriors,
really a big guy.
Stone Cold, The Rock, Triple H. But now, for once, WWE was acknowledging the technicians.
Yes.
The Chris Benoits and Eddie Guerreros, the guys who, pretty much would, always be in the opener matches or the mid-card matches. And they never really, had the main event spotlight on them until, that moment, WrestleMania 20, Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
And
What a
that's
better
the only
place to have
reason
it.
why I have to acknowledge the wrestler Chris Benoit, because in that ring, nobody can say he was a bad wrestler.
No.
Absolutely shitty
No.
human being for what happened. I don't care
Yes.
about the whole friggin' thing that happened with the CDL stuff in his brain. It still doesn't change the fact that, Nancy and, Daniel are gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is probably the only time we're ever going to really talk about Chris Benoit.
Yeah. Don't think that we're acknowledging him as a human being, like we're saying. Just so, yeah, definitely. It's just we can't ignore, as a wrestling podcast, we cannot ignore what he did, in that ring, because we're talking about some of the best wrestling technicians, and we cannot not have a show like this without Chris Benoit's name.
And that's the
sure.
thing, man. Like the suplexes that he did, the sharpshooters, all like the work that he did, beyond the mat, like even the strong style that Chris Benoit brought.
The snap
He
suplex.
was, man, one of the cleanest wrestlers in that ring.
Yeah, we can segue right into the man that without whom there would have been no Chris Benoit, and that is one half of the British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid. What an amazing freaking wrestler.
That's something like I've never really done, Chaz, was look into what happened with the Dynamite Kid. What exactly happened? Because didn't he get a really bad injury?
He had a really bad back injury. So in kayfabe, what happened was, watch the match when remember that whole thing with Danny Davis when they were having him kind of turn into the before he got fired, he was kind of screwing everybody over, slowly but surely. So first it was Macho Man beating Tito Santana when he hit him with the quarters, and then in Boston Garden.
Oh, the quarters.
That was the start of it. Then
that was before the brass knucks.
Yep, that was the start of it, and that was February 8th, 1986. And then the Hart Foundation, he would turn his back on things and ignore stuff that was going on. And basically the whole match was Davey Boy Smith. So they would, he went out there and basically he was laying there the whole match. Dynamite Kid was on the floor the entire match, 90%, 99%. And so Jim the Anvil Neidhart, they did the Heart Attack, and they won the titles. And basically Danny Davis counted that quick, and that was it. And that was the way that, it was the way to get Danny Davis' story to, further, and also to get the belts off of
so going into that match,
Bulldog.
Dynamite Kid was already hurt.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So what caused his injury?
I believe, I'm trying to remember. It was he had a back injury in Japan, I believe. Yeah. He had a really bad back injury in Japan.
That's the thing, man. Dynamite Kid, I've seen highlight reels, of his work, and he was one of, the best technician wrestlers out there.
You wouldn't be able to tell. I mean, he still wrestled after that. And I mean, but he was so doped up on painkillers. I mean, that was the thing, so it was affecting his work, he just couldn't get through it. I mean, there was no way, he had no choice. I mean, it was sad because he was so talented. His snap suplex, there was none like it.
Really, man. And somebody I definitely want to dive into a little bit as well, since we're talking about technicians. And there was a certain time where this superstar would, use his technical style abilities for quite a while in his career. Still does to this day. Y2J, Chris Jericho.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because, of course, Chris Jericho, he's had, 30 years in this business. And if there's anybody that's, adapted and evolved throughout the years, it was the Lionheart.
Oh,
and that's where he first started his, wrestling career. He started off as the Lionheart, and he relied on, his technical abilities in the ring. And, he was doing that, for, pretty much like the first 10 years of his career as the Lionheart, and then going to, WCW as, Chris Jericho, and, having a great, title run with the Cruiserweight title,
Yep.
and doing, the feud with Dean Malenko that, we talked about earlier in this episode. And then, in WWE, I feel like that's where we really started to see Jericho become a complete wrestler. Because of
Yes.
course in WCW, we started to see like him work great as a character.
Yeah.
But in WWE, especially during the Attitude Era, one of the most popular times in pro wrestling, we really got to see Jericho become a complete wrestler. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
the
The
day he
Y2J.
became a
Yeah.
complete wrestler was when he beat The Rock and Stone Cold on the same night
Yes. Yes. I have the picture of that
and won
actually on my
both
phone.
championships.
Yep. And they got unified. Yeah. That was great. Yeah. He has some really great matches in WCW with Juventud Guerrero. Actually.
Juventud
Yeah.
Guerrero.
Yep. He did some really good
I
stuff
remember
with
them
him.
like going back in AEW recently, and Jericho had to fight Juventud Guerrero like as one of like MJF stipulations.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. They had a really good feud.
And I kind of like that in AEW. Like they actually acknowledge Chris Jericho as the Lionheart.
Yeah.
Like there's
that
some
was
times
cool.
where Jericho will come out with, the yellow and the black tights, and he would wrestle as Lionheart.
Yeah, it was iconic. It was so cool. Yeah. To see
Because
that.
that's like going back to like the early days when Jericho first started in, the business.
Oh, absolutely. And he was
Wrestling
trained
in
by
Mexico, wrestling in
Yep.
Japan, wrestling all over the world.
and getting all those styles, that Mexican, the luchador, the Japan, that's another style we didn't even think of. Japanese, that's another style.
Strong style, baby.
Yeah, the Japanese strong style. I mean, then there's British strong style and there's Japanese strong style. There's two different, but there's a little difference.
What would you say like the difference would be between the Japanese style and, the British style?
The British is more like, the Japanese was more like the technician side, and the British, I would say, was more like the more like the submission side of it. So that's probably the
Yeah, no,
way to
that
go with it.
totally makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Definitely. Speaking
but-
of an underrated British technician, there was this group in TNA in around 2009 called the British Invasion.
Oh, I love them. Yes.
And, we had Magnus, who, obviously that's Nick Aldis, one of, the cleanest technicians out there. But this guy that I'm about to mention, very underrated because he's never really been on the bigger spotlight. Doug Williams.
Okay.
Such a clean technician. And I believe he's training wrestlers right now.
Is he really? Nice.
Yeah. Such a clean technician.
Absolutely. I love that.
So now I really want to dive in to some of the new school technicians out there, the little percent that we have in, today's wrestling.
Sure.
Because of course, back in the day, we had Bret the Hitman Hart, we had Owen Hart, we had Eddie Guerrero, William Regal, Dean Malenko, so many iconic, technicians out there.
Yes.
But of course, the new school, there's definitely some guys that, went out and, took some of the old school guys' technical abilities.
It's gonna be different this year. We're gonna be at Donnie's house again this year.
Not one, but two nights.
nights. Yeah, you're definitely gonna want to be there for sure. It's gonna be fucking A1. Be there, be square.
Yeah. And like you say, you mentioned MJF earlier.
That's a guy that's complete.
Yeah. That is the total package. 120 billion %, bro. My thing is 120%. That's 120
Dude, Bryan
billion%.
Danielson versus MJF, man, 60 minutes, AEW Revolution 2003 or 2023. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Such a
Yes.
classic. And that's the first person I want to get into. New school wrestling, man. Bryan Danielson.
Yeah, I was gonna
Probably
bring
the
that
best
too.
technician, best technical wrestler right now in
Absolutely.
this day and age, man. Probably for the last like almost 20 years, Bryan Danielson has been like the best technician. Did amazing work as the American Dragon in Ring of
Yeah.
Honor, and then, going from there to WWE as Daniel Bryan. He was able to, still do his, technical wrestling abilities. That was, a part of him for his whole career, which I really like that they didn't change that from him.
Right.
And then, coming back, to, the independent circuit and, joining AEW as Bryan Danielson
Yeah.
again, it's great to see like him be the American Dragon
Right.
and do all of these sick freaking technical maneuvers.
I mean, he's such the thing I love about Bryan Danielson is there was people that I was listening to, I was telling you on the way, on the way to the studio that there was a lot of guys, a lot of shooter interviews I was listening to. There was so many guys that were not counting on him, like they were definitely downing him, and they were like, or doubting him. What they were like, there's no way this guy's gonna make it. He's so small, and he just had such a big heart, and he just proved everybody so wrong, and just fought his way to the top, and he is just right on top now. Like you said, MJF and him having even a better match, like you said, better Iron Man match, and Brett and Sean.
And that's the thing, man,
So,
with, Bryan Danielson. It's like every time he's in the ring, it's such an art. You're
yes.
watching somebody with, a paintbrush, and you're watching pretty much Bob Ross
I was gonna say Bob Ross.
just, pretty much painting a beautiful sculpture. And that's like what Bryan Danielson does in every match. And that's like what makes his character connect so well with the audience, is that, he relies 100% on his technical wrestling.
Yes.
And that's what makes him, such a fan favorite.
Happy little hurricane. Yeah, absolutely. And you were talking about FTR too. Those are guys that definitely respect the past. They're the ones who, we talked about it in the tag team episode. They brought tag team wrestling back into existence. I mean, they don't really, and they both are, and they're friends with a guy. You're gonna probably find this surprising, but I'm gonna mention, definitely have to give credit to CM Punk. He's a great technician, and I mean,
Yes, he
he's
is.
not my favorite, but I can't take away the talent that the guy has. Just because I don't maybe not like the guy, as he's not my favorite, I can't take away what he did, what he does.
And that's the thing, man, with CM Punk. He first started off his career like as like a high flyer. And then, towards, his world title runs in Ring of Honor, that's like when he started to, do technical wrestling. And then, he brought it into WWE during, them trying to revive ECW.
Yeah.
And, he became more of a complete wrestler through his time in WWE. And I'm very happy to see CM Punk back, in wrestling when he came back to AEW. As a CM Punk fan, I was very happy to see that. And that's something CM Punk always relied on, was his technical wrestling abilities, because he would put these guys in, submission holds,
Yeah.
jujitsu. He did, a lot of, mixed martial art type of moves. He even transitioned when he left WWE and did a couple fights in the UFC. Even though the man got his ass kicked, he
He
still
still
showed
tried.
that
Yeah.
he can, he's a solid technical wrestler.
Yeah. Yep. So definitely, I gotta give it to him. I have to.
One of the best in the world, man, around this
Yep.
time, I think. But somebody definitely I would love to, talk about. She has had a very underrated career as a technical wrestler. She was in WWE for a couple times, but obviously, you know, she wasn't about the whole diva thing.
Started off in
And she just
WCW, did
didn't.
she?
Nope. She like started off, you know, like in like with WWE, she just didn't fit what they were looking for. And she made a remarkable career in TNA. Got to give credit where it's due. The first ever knockout champion, Gail Kim.
Whoa, yes.
Such an underrated technician in that ring. So talented.
Yes.
And it's crazy to me to see like in WWE around, you know, 2002 when they had Gail Kim that like they let her slip away and go to TNA a couple years later because they had such an underrated roster around that time.
Yeah.
And I'm talking the wrestling abilities. I'm not talking about like the looks or anything because
No.
obviously around the time in WWE, they're focusing on like the bra and panty matches and the pillow fights.
Yeah.
But around this time, you had Trish Stratus, you had Lita, you had Molly Holly, you also had Jazz. You even had Victoria as well, who was a very underrated, you know, worker in the ring.
Yes.
Gail Kim, the career that she has made in TNA, so impressive. She's had classics with, you know, Tessa Blanchard, friggin' Mickey James, Velvet Sky. So many great matches that, you know, Gail Kim has had in her career. And a lot of it was in Impact Wrestling, which is absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah.
Because after her first run in TNA, she actually tried to go back to WWE and they had this like bikini, like battle royal match. And Gail Kim literally eliminated herself and quit right on the spot.
Yes. I remember that.
And then she came back to TNA and, you know, finished her career there. Really shows the loyalty.
Yeah, for sure.
Any
I have
old
to say,
male wrestlers that were technicians that you can, you know,
female wrestlers
talk about? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, believe it or not, Sensational Sherry. She was one of the absolute most amazing female wrestlers. She could wrestle every style. I mean, she was a legit badass wrestler. She could do it all. She had a great persona. She could great on the mic. She was just and she was the women's champion. She beat Fabulous Moolah. She ended Fabulous Moolah's reign of 27 years as women's champion.
Yeah, man. Didn't she even like train under Fabulous Moolah as well?
Trained her. Yep.
That's freaking crazy, man.
There's also this Japanese tag team, the Jumping Bomb Angels. They were the women's tag team champions back in the WWF. They were really good. Really, really good.
I gotta say though, Tessa Blanchard, she's very good technical wrestler.
When you said Tessa Blanchard, I was like, oh.
I enjoyed her run in Impact Wrestling, but unfortunately, she caught herself in a lot of, you know, drama outside of the ring, with the locker rooms and stuff, which sucks because she is so talented
like her dad.
that she could be a main event star in AEW or WWE right now, which is crazy. But unfortunately, due to all the backstage stuff that's happened and, you know, all the allegations that are against her, it's just unfortunate. It sucks.
Yeah.
But a couple underrated guys that, you know, I definitely want to, you know, pretty much give, you know, a quick little shout out to American Alpha.
Ooh.
Man, I'm talking Chad Gable and Jason Jordan. Such a great tag team in NXT. I remember the classics that they had with, you know, the likes of FTR. Also, you know, Authors of Pain. They've had incredible matches in NXT.
Yes.
And for me, like seeing Gable in WWE right now, oh, it drives me so crazy, man.
Yes.
He's so freaking talented.
So good. So good. Absolutely.
That's somebody I would love to see transition in AEW.
He is absolutely, and you know my thing about, you know, when wrestlers are, you know, contracts are up, everybody going, oh, he's going to WWE, oh, he's going to AEW. I you know, I can't stand that, but he is definitely one that I think would be a great fit for AEW, definitely. I agree.
I
with you.
will say though, what they've done with him and Otis, you know,
Yeah,
with like Alpha Academy,
it's
I
actually pretty
do
good.
enjoy.
Yeah, I actually gotta say, I definitely
But I want to see what
like it.
Gable can do as a singles
Yes,
wrestler, man.
yes,
Because here's the thing, like
it's coming.
it's crazy to me to like see that like they almost gave this man a solid push around the time with, you know, the King of the Ring tournament, and then they had Corbin, you know, end up winning, and then they changed him from Gable to fucking Shorty G.
Yeah, that was so stupid.
Dude, if Gable could be booked properly, he could literally be the next Kurt Angle. Seriously.
Yeah,
And it sucks, unfortunately, with Jason Jordan, you know, being injured and, you know, not being able to get cleared to come back in the ring. Because American Alpha, I would love to see, you know, them come back at some
yeah,
point.
definitely,
Because they made such a great tag team.
for sure. One of my favorites, going back old school, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, and he's so underrated as he was such a great character, but people think more of his character work than his actual in-ring work, was Ted DiBiase, Million Dollar Man. Just such a clean wrestler and such an amazing technician. I mean, the guy was just so good. So good. Ted DiBiase, I don't know. I gotta say for me, probably Owen, definitely.
Yeah, Owen Hart, man, one of the
Yeah, he was
best.
complete. He was all around complete. If they had kept him as the Black Heart, first of all, he'd still be alive. Second of all, he could have been world champion. That character was just so amazing.
All right, so before we get into the differences between old school and new school technical wrestling and talk about which one we think is better, I want to dive into two technical legends, Kurt Angle and Bret the Hitman Hart.
Ooh, okay.
Because in old school, Bret Hart was always considered the best technical wrestler.
Yes.
In new school wrestling, Kurt Angle has always been considered the best technical wrestler. And there was a time, WrestleMania 20, WWE was trying to get Bret the Hitman Hart out of retirement to have one final match with Kurt Angle, but ended
Oh,
up choosing not to have that match with Kurt Angle because he felt like he couldn't give Kurt Angle 150%.
wow. Wow. And you have to give that credit to Bret Hart, because he was such a perfectionist, and that says a lot coming from Bret Hart. That he basically gave Kurt Angle that much credit to fucking say that. You know, everybody thinks of Bret as having such an ego, but to say that,
Dude, the match was so close from happening too. Angle wanted it so bad.
yeah.
And that's the thing,
Man.
man. Like with me, with Kurt Angle, as you know, a new school fan, Kurt Angle for me has always been my all-time favorite technical wrestler besides Owen Hart. I've always enjoyed his work because the character was pretty much a technical freaking genius in the ring. Like he
Absolutely.
relied on, you know, his amateur wrestling, and
Yep.
he was just larger than life with his character.
Even
And
as
like
goofy as he was at times, he still got in that ring and he was all business.
that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
especially in TNA, man.
Yeah.
Kurt
Oh, in
Angle
TNA,
was on
he
a whole
changed.
other level, man.
Yeah, TNA, that's when he got all cut and he lost that weight and he just slimmed down and he became he was an animal.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing, man. Like for me, one of my favorite technical rivalries of all time has got to be Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe. I
Oh,
loved their feud because Samoa Joe
yes.
around the time in TNA was undefeated for like over like 3 years at this point, And then, Kurt Angle came in and he wanted Samoa Joe. He didn't want
Oh
the world
yeah.
title right away. He wanted Joe. And you had the
Yeah.
famous headbutt he did to Samoa Joe. And then, they went on to have a classical rivalry for years in TNA.
Yes. And that's
Samoa
the
Joe's an
thing.
underrated technical wrestler.
Oh, I
too.
love Samoa Joe. And that was the thing we were talking earlier about Solo. I just hope he doesn't get that, Samoa Joe curse, what
Mhm.
they but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah,
That's a
so
whole
with
nother
Bret
episode.
Hart,
But
going back into like Bret Hart now, like old school related, like what are some things that really stood out to you with Bret Hart's career? The
he
best there
had
is, the
some
best there was, the best there ever will be.
yeah, absolutely. The excellence of execution, as Gorilla called him. That was Gorilla called him now. And actually in 1986, he was the most they would call him and Lord Alfred Hayes would call him the most improved wrestler. He was actually a singles wrestler. Started off. Him and Jim Neidhart started off as singles
Was this
wrestlers.
in WWF or was
Yeah.
this in like Stampede
No,
Wrestling?
no. Well, this is before Stampede. No, this is after Stampede. I'm talking WWF. Um, he was just a kid really in Stampede. He was young in WWF. But I'm talking just strictly WWF. Like 1985, 86-ish, but 85, more 85. They were singles wrestlers, and Jimmy Hart came in and brought them together, and they would tag up once in a while. But if you watch, I watch a lot of the old house shows and stuff like on Madison Square Garden and Boston Garden Network, and they split them up and they would wrestle singles matches and stuff. And they didn't really form the full tag team until like late 86. And that's when they really formed and really, Jimmy Hart brought them together. But he was called the most improved wrestler, and you could just tell that everybody thought Jim Neidhart was going to be the standout star, at the time, because he was just had that great crazy character, and Brett was kind of boring on the mic, but that's what it was. He was quiet, but when he got in those ropes, man, it was all
Wasn't it like that
fun.
with Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels too?
Yeah, Marty Jannetty was better, a lot better than Shawn. Well, not a lot better, but I mean, he was. Arn Anderson has said numerous times that Marty was better at the time than Shawn was, and we all know after that barbershop, that's what elevated Shawn Michaels to that next level.
Absolutely, man. And with Bret Hart, what was one of your favorite matches with him?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, besides the Stone Cold match in WrestleMania 13.
Well, besides Owen and Brett, because we all know, man,
Oh yeah.
those...
Oh God, that's not even fair. That's not even fair.
We always talk about
Yeah.
on Old School.
Yeah, absolutely. He had actually some feud, really good feud with Papa Shango. He had some matches with Kurt Hennig. He had some Mr. Perfect. He had some real good matches with Mr. Perfect. And you want to talk about two technicians? That was.
What match from them do you recommend Old School versus New School Maniacs to check out?
I don't remember really right off the top of my head what pay-per-view, but just Google, just put it in your YouTube machine and a bunch of them will come up.
That's how you guys know Old School Chaz is old. He's calling YouTube a YouTube machine.
Yes.
Chaz, we're not in VCRs anymore, DVDs.
No, because
not even Blu-rays, man. We're digital.
No, dude. No, because that's what Conrad Thompson says. Put it in your Google machine or whatever. No, just type it in and it'll come up.
So now, like, with like New School, with like Kurt Angle and stuff, I've always, enjoyed a lot of his work and a lot of his matches. Somebody, I followed his entire career. I loved, his work with Samoa Joe in TNA, going into WWE. I loved, the work with Kurt Angle and Stone Cold because I felt like it really brought the character out of Kurt Angle so much. And then, even going into Ruthless Aggression, him and Edge, their feud, when Edge, buzzed ahead because that became a whole thing. And Edge started the "You Suck" chant, and that just completed Kurt Angle
Yes.
to a whole nother level. And then he would have the
Absolutely.
Olympic gold medal, which the thing I loved about Kurt Angle was the character. Instead of being an Olympic hero that everybody can just look up to and say, my God, that's my Olympic gold medalist, Kurt Angle. Like, thank you for what you've done for our country.
Right.
Kurt Angle just has that medal and he's pretty much, bragging about it. I have an Olympic gold medal. Do you have one of these? No, you don't.
That's got to go in the intro.
And that's the thing, man. Kurt Angle, like, always pretty much would, like, brag about his gold medal. And then I remember in, like, 2005, he would do these, like, open challenges with the Olympic gold medal. And then Eugene ended up freaking taking the gold medal from him. and that was just great, man. Kurt Angle was so good.
Eugene Uso. Oh, gosh. Oh, Kurt. Everybody's like, what?
So, of course, you know how we end all these episodes of Old School versus New School. We always compare the two, and we always have to pick which is better. Old School technical wrestling or New School technical wrestling? Which one do you got to go with and why?
I mean, there's New School has got some great technical wrestlers. But this one I have to give only because Old School is where technical wrestling really came from. And like you said, MJF and, FTR, they took from the Old School. So I'm going to say Old School has it on this one. Because I mean, and although there's a lot of guys we didn't even mention, like Lou Thez going back to the 50s and whatever. I mean, that's where the submission stuff came from. Bob Backlund, whatever. But definitely,
oh yeah, that chicken wing, man, it hurts.
Oh, that hurt like a mother. He put that on me and Donnie when yes. So, and that was when he was old. So, but yeah. Old School's I gotta give it to Old School in this one.
And that's the thing, man. Believe it or not, I'm going to have to give it to Old School over New School. Because the problem is, man, in New School with technical wrestling, like, it's great that, like, certain people like MJF and, Timothy Thatcher, somebody we never covered, Shelton Benjamin, Charlie Haas,
Brock
Lesnar.
Yeah.
And,
I was gonna say
these
Haas.
guys pretty much, do bring the technical amateur wrestling to the sport today. And a lot of these guys are more focused on the high flying. So it's kind of cool that not everybody's doing it. But back then with Old School wrestling, when they would do these moves, the technical wrestling, it mattered.
Yes.
And that's what I have to give Old School over New School, because when they would do these technical moves, like you were saying in this episode, they would go after a certain body part.
Yes.
They would work at that body part and
telling a story.
A story, and you would have a finish that would make total sense.
Yes.
No wonder why friggin' this guy tapped out. Friggin' Greg was working on his leg the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, it made a lot of logical sense there. And if it wasn't for the Old School technicians like Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, we would not be having these, MJFs and FTRs and,
Bryan
some
Danielsons.
of these great technical wrestlers that we have today, because realistically, they have all taken stuff from these Old School guys. And the problem is with technical wrestling, you can't really do something and make it cooler than what it is with Old School. Old School, like when you do the Tree of Woe, that's what it is, right? When you grab like the legs and then you grab the arms at the same time and you lift them up.
Yeah, like the and the surfboard or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so like when you do like the surfboard maneuver, that's something that, like, you can't do today different than what you would do back then.
No,
And that's why I got to give it to old school, because coming up with a lot of these maneuvers, you got to give credit where it's due,
absolutely.
because it's very original.
Yeah.
And, with high flying, of course, you can, adapt and do different things because, everybody's doing it. So everybody's got, a notepad and they're trying to, do something better than the other person. Oh,
Right.
I just did a 360 DDT. Okay, I could do a 720 DDT.
360. I'm not saying some of the spots aren't beautiful and some of the stuff's not nice. And it's like I've said holy shit a million times, but it's just too much.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Stay on the mat sometimes. Wrestle.
But to the We Are Wrestling Maniacs out there, let us know in the comments section below your thoughts, on some of your favorite best technical wrestlers you think that maybe we didn't mention on this episode. Let us know your favorite. If you guys enjoyed this week's episode of Old School versus New School, make sure to smash that like button now. If you're not a We Are Wrestling Maniac yet already, subscribe, turn on the post notifications. The link's down in the description below. You can go follow Chaz on Instagram. You can go follow me on my social medias and other YouTube pages, all that down below. In addition, you want shorter clips of, these podcasts. We're posting them on our social medias. We Are Wrestling, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all that down below. And of course, to all the We Are Wrestling Maniacs out there worldwide, we are taking over. Peace.
Cheers.